thought of taking actually a neat in English Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. So I want to read actually 4 verses with purports. So it's 18, 36, 37, 38, 39. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So here we're in a section which, in my opinion, really reveals the profound nature of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, practical, very detailed, and I say scientific wisdom about life that is extremely relevant and immediately applicable in our lives. It's a whole section where Krishna, he talks about what he call the gunas and the free modes of nature. And I'm not going to get into details about the gunas, but he analyzes or exemplifies the gunas, the understanding of the gunas, with different aspects of life, and how these different aspects of life manifest in these 3 gunas or qualities of nature. And the last one, no, actually not the last one, but one of the last ones he analyzes is happiness. Now, happiness is, of course, a very important topic. I would imagine some would say it's the most important topic. It's also a very elusive topic. It's very hard to actually, how do you quantify happiness? Some scientists have tried to quantify happiness. Even there were some scientists who claim that Danes are the most happy people on the planet. You can even find that when you arrive in the airport. Carlsberg has an advertisement. This is the most happy people on the earth. I was always skeptical on that. I actually tried to investigate a little where does this come from. It turned out it's some Dutch researchers who are researching in this very relevant topic. But one problem they had was they couldn't even define what it meant. But according to some criteria, maybe Danes were happy, but to other criteria, maybe they were not. It was actually very vague, the whole thing. But of course, the media, they jumped on that, and it's a whole like modern myth that Danes are very happy with. And of course, we know that 500,000 Danes are eating happiness pills, so we must be happy. That aside, it's a very, very important topic, but also I say it's very elusive. I had one time I discussed with one relative, and he said, I only believe in very concrete things. I don't think anything that is not concrete, that you cannot quantify, measure, like that other things have no relevance. So I asked, what about happiness? How do you quantify? I cannot quantify. And then I asked, but is it relevant? Well, actually, I guess all the goal of our endeavors has something to do with happiness, isn't it? So it must be important, but you cannot really. But here is actually, Bhagavad Gita is very, very detailed and very scientific in its own way. So I thought I'd take 4 verses here which are discussing happiness and different kinds of happiness. Because it turns out, as Krishna explains, there's not only one kind of happiness. There's happiness for people in the different qualities of nature. And, so here it says, Sukham Tudanim Trividam Sriname Bharatashava Avyasat Ramate Yatra Dukkantam Nanigat Chati. O best of the Bharatas, of course it's Krishna speaking, addressing Arjuna. O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. So there are three kinds of happiness. Not one, but three kinds of happiness. And some kinds of happiness, they lead to the end of all misery. Understand, implying that the other kinds of happiness actually doesn't cease misery. Prabhupada writes here in the purport, a conditioned soul tries to enjoy material happiness again and again. Thus he choose the choose. This is kind of, Prabhupada doesn't explain this sentence, he choose the choose, but it's an expression that is appearing in many places in Prabhupada's writings and in the Puranas, in the Bhagavatam, called Punas Chavita Chavananam. It refers to, for example, in India, sugarcane and sugarcane juice is a very tasty substance. And we can get sugarcane and you can chew on sugarcane, and it's great candy. So, but also in you see the vendors are selling sugarcane juice, so they will take sugarcane and they'll put it through the squeezing machine and squeeze out juice, and then they will bend it over, and then they will squeeze out more juice, and then they'll bend it over once more, and again they will squeeze it again, and after that there's not one drop of juice left. And then they'll take just this dried out coconut, sugarcane, and just throw it on the ground. And then next thing happens is a cow will come walking, searching for something to eat, and they'll see, sugarcane. And they'll go, and then they will pick up this dry sugarcane and chew on it. But it's gone, there's no juice, it will spit it out again. And then, 10 minutes later, next cow comes and says, oh, sugarcane. And he will pick it up, she will pick it up, and again chew on it, spit it out, there's no juice in it. In this way you can have cows, whole day coming, picking up the same sugarcane, spitting it out, chewing the chewed. It's been already chewed. And you try to get some juice out of it, but there's no juice. So that's referred to material enjoyments. You try to enjoy that which has been tried over and over again, and no one found happiness in it, but still, okay, you try again and again. So that's what this sentence refers to. Thus he choose the chewed. But sometimes in the course of such enjoyment, he becomes relieved from material entanglement by association with a great soul. In other words, a conditioned soul is always engaged in some type of sense gratification, but when he understands by good association that it is only a repetition of the same thing, and he is awakened to his real Krishna consciousness, he is sometimes relieved from such repetitive so-called happiness. Text 37. Yat tat agre visham iva parinama mrito pamam tat sukham sabikam proktam atma buddhi prasada yam. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. Prabhupada writes in the purport, in the pursuit of self-realization, one has to follow many rules and regulations to control the mind and senses and to concentrate the mind on the self. All these procedures are very difficult, bitter like poison, but if one is successful in following the regulations and comes to the transcendental position, he begins to drink real nectar and he enjoys life. Text 38. Visa yendriya samyogat yat tat agrim mito pamam parinama visham iva tat sukham samsmitam. That happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with the objects and which appears like nectar at first but poison at the end is said to be of the nature of passion. If you noticed the contrast, goodness, how was that? It was in the beginning it appears bitter like poison, but in the end it comes out like nectar. Passion is, in the beginning it's like nectar, but it ends up like poison. Prabhupada writes, a young man and a young woman meet, and the senses drive the young man to see her, to touch her, and to have sexual intercourse. In the beginning, this may be very pleasing to the senses, but at the end, after some time, it becomes just like poison. They are separated, or there is divorce, there is lamentation, there is sorrow, etc. Such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. Text 39. Yat agre chanabande cha sukham mohanam atmanaha nidra lasya pramado tam tatamasam udari tam. And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness and illusion, is said to be of the nature of ignorance. Purport. One who takes pleasure in laziness and in sleep is certainly in the mode of darkness, ignorance, and one who has no idea how to act and how not to act is also in the mode of ignorance. For the person in the mode of ignorance, everything is illusion. There is no happiness either in the beginning or at the end. For the person in the mode of passion, there might be some kind of ephemeral happiness in the beginning and at the end distress. But for the person in the mode of ignorance, there's only distress both in the beginning and at the end. And that's the end of Prabhupada's purport on the Krishna discussions of these three kinds of happiness. I always found this passage extremely relevant, extremely interesting. And we can try here to first compare a little, elaborate a little, so we take from the bottom, mode of ignorance, happiness in the mode of ignorance. As it was said here, it's under illusion one thinks there will be some happiness, but actually it's suffering from beginning to end. I think we can recognize that in some, for example, intoxicants, intoxication. Some, especially those who are addicted, think they will get some happiness from a certain kind of intoxicant, but it's misery all the way through, completely all the way through. It's from, and one might also be engaged in some illusory plans, and it will just be misery. It will, if one is engaged in thinking, I will be happy by causing suffering to others, like in vengeance, if one is very vengeful. One of the things, if I can revenge myself against my enemy, I'll become happy. But it's misery all the way through, even if one revenges, just be more misery. And there are many examples of actually the whole undertaking is misery from beginning to end. In the mode of passion, it's said here, actually there is some, feeling of some actual happiness. Of course, Yatra says it's a drop of water in the ocean, not in the desert, it's a drop of water in the desert. But there is some experience of some happiness. One is working, diligently and correctly, and one engages in some economic development, one establishes oneself, one gets, for example, one gets married, one finds a nice wife, nice husband, one has some nice children, and so on. And there's a certain happiness associated with that. But in also a lot of hard work and misery. And it's said here in the end, it becomes misery. Becomes misery. Of course, property refers to man, woman getting together, and there's divorce, lamentation, there's sorrow. Here it refers, of course, very much to the combination of man and woman by get immediate attraction like that, which is very passionate. And these kind of attractions, they are happiness in the beginning, but it ends up very, very lot of misery because there's so many desires involved in this, and these desires will not be fulfilled. Rather, they'll be frustrated after some time, and that is unavoidable. If nothing else, even though one may have in the mode of passion, one is creating his enjoyable situation in a lawful, regulated, intelligent way. One thing you should understand that in the mode of passion, actually, there's quite much intelligence and planning and so on involved, not so much in ignorance. But there is, if one acts properly and creates a somewhat enjoyable situation, but it all ends with death. In the end, we all separated with death. So it will be, if that's everything that one has based one's happiness on, in combination of the senses of the body with the sense objects, with having, nice, the right circumstances, one will be frustrated, one will be pulled out at one point. If nothing else, death will separate one from one's enjoyable situation. So it will be frustrated, and as that's also the nature of enjoyment in the mode of passion. Since it is by nature temporary, one cannot really be peacefully enjoyed because one knows it will be over sooner or later. So but there's a difference still between passion and ignorance. In passion and goodness, also we see there was a marked difference. Passionate is happiness in the beginning, misery at the end. In the mode of goodness, it's misery in the beginning, happiness in the end. And also the source of happiness in passion is contact of the senses with the sense objects. Combining the senses of the body with something enjoyable, or creating an enjoyable environment or situation. Whereas in goodness, actually the happiness is not depending on the senses and the sense object, on external environment. It's happiness coming from within. It's the Sanskrit here is interesting. It says Atma Buddhi Prasada Jam, where prasada means satisfaction, happiness or satisfaction. Jam means born of. So it's happiness born of Atma Buddhi. Atma means self, Buddhi means intelligence. So it's happiness born from intelligence of the self, understanding the self. That's where the actual happiness in the mode of goodness comes from. And to achieve that happiness, the happiness that is coming from within the self, it's an endeavor. It's an endeavor to get to that point, because, as Prabhupada writes here, that there are rules and regulations one has to follow to come to that point. Why? Because we have senses and we have mind that divert us and constantly drag us into, to be attracted to the objects of the world, the objects of the senses. We are, in one sense, like addicts. We are somewhat addicted. Maybe somewhat, completely. addicted to enjoying, to be happy in a passionate way, you know, to see nice forms, to feel nice things, to, you know, eat nice food, hear nice sounds, smell nice smells, you know, find enjoyable situations, you know, warm weather, nice people, and so on and so on, wealth, and it's you know, this is where we used, and we are addicted to these kinds of enjoyments, even though we are, and a symptom of being addicted is that even though one by intelligence understands it's actually harmful, it's not desirable, but one is being pushed, and you know, it's very, very difficult to resist. So, to come to that point of realizing the happiness coming from the self, one has to be able to curb the pushings of the senses and the mind, and that is difficult. That is it's bitter like poison. Anyone tried to give up some addiction? Anyone gave up smoking, for example? Someone is nodding. And, it's so difficult. It's so but then also one overcomes the addiction. Oh, what the happiness actually, just from being, you know, not being disturbed by that addiction. But it takes a lot of determination, a lot of self-control and determination. So that has been referred to here, that one has to follow rules and regulations and disciplines to come to that, you know, platform where one finds happiness in the self. So that's of course the whole teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, that there is a self that can be realized, you know, a concrete self. That's the first teaching found in the Bhagavad Gita, that happiness, you know, we are not, because that's in the mode of passion. When one is influenced by the mode of passion, when one identifies with the body as the body, one sees others as the body, we can understand our whole modern world is completely in the mode of passion, practically in the mode of passion. Because where do we learn, for example, in our, you know, in our educations and so on, that we are not this body? That was always Prabhupada's complaints about modern education. Where do we, you know, we have all these great institutions of learning. You know, there's never been such a, you know, worldwide, we've never had such a mass educational program on such a level. But where are we learning the science of understanding the self and realize, you know, and just understanding that the self is different from the body? Nowhere do we learn that. Rather, we learn the very opposite. We learn that actually we are this body. Life is just material, chemicals, meaning we are just this body. Happiness means happiness in the body, meaning, you know, get a good education, then we can get a good job, you can make money, you can get a good position in society, you get security, you'll be able to, you know, create the environment you like, you'll be bodily happy, you'll be happy. It's a whole drive. Behind all the sophistication, that is the foundational understanding. So Prabhupada is criticizing that. Where is the institution that actually teaches what it, he said, one point he said, the difference between a living body and a dead body. What is the difference? He said, according to Bhagavad Gita, the difference is the self has left the body, and that's why the self is what makes the body living. The body is actually never living at any point. It's just because there's self inside, and when the self leaves the body, then the body is dead. Where is the scientists who are researching that? Actually, they do exist, and they have made, and the results from these scientists demonstrate beyond doubt we are, the selves are is different from the body, but that knowledge does not come out because it's not the modern world is ruled by passion, and our modern institutions of learning are actually, in one sense, you might say, temples or churches of passion, of materialism. So even though there are researchers, there's researchers who have studied near-death experiences, and they have, beyond doubt, shown that people who have these near-death experiences have observed things which they cannot possibly have seen if they're just a body. The only explanation is that if someone leaves their body and is actually someone is in a complete coma. A coma means as you are as dead. There's no brain waves. There's nothing. And if someone who wakens from a coma and afterwards is able to tell, actually, I was hovering above my body, I was seeing the surgical operation taking place, I was overhearing what the nurses and the doctors were saying, and they're repeating what they were saying, and many details. And the only way that they can have this knowledge is there must be cells who are able to leave the body and observe their conscious cells outside the body. And this has been researched by many, many medical doctors and documented. Even Lancet, the world's leading medical journal, published a study in, I think it was 2001, of near-death experience, and said there's something we have to research here. There's something absolutely. Or the research of Ian Stevenson, an American-Canadian psychiatrist who studied small children who remembered previous lifetimes, and he documented 3,000 cases. He was researching this topic for more than 45 years. He documented 3,000 cases where a small child had memories of a past existence, where he could document that a person had lived previously corresponding to a description of that child, and the child had no so-called normal way of having this knowledge. We're talking about children at the age 2 to 4 or 5 years old. And he documented 3,000 cases like that. It's the most extensive reincarnation research undertaken, and it's been written about in all in top psychiatrist journals, and he published many books and so on. But why is that not out why is not that part of biology, for example? It's an actual phenomenon. Well, our modern educational system is ruled by passionate ideologies where we are this body, and anything else that falls outside is actually not politically acceptable. That is more or less the situation. So Prabhupada was criticizing that, why do we not learn the basic things in our education? Who are we? That should be what, it should be the first thing we should learn about, actually. Who are we? What is the self? Even, if we pride ourselves that we, in West, our educational system goes back to the Greeks and like that, but that was also, they had, what is the Greek for? Is it something like gnosis, theaton? Is that right? Anyone who knows Greek here? I don't know. But it simply means know thyself. That's that, it means that's the first thing. One should know himself. What are we actually? And from there, then one can, and that should be the main goal of all education. So that's a teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, that we are conscious selves different from the body, which actually should be obvious to, if one's just a little contemplative. Krishna gives a simple argument: body is changing, the conscious self is unchangeable, always, constantly within